virgins after all these years. I remember the day that Bernie walked out of his studio in regard to the Bloody Sunday 1919 General Strike Monument, which he had just designed and orchestrated all the engineers. And he threw up his hands and said, "My work here is done," and he was dead within 2 weeks. He was a very dramatic fellow. You have to get used to me because I'm not an academic. I'm very proud to say that when I taught at the University of Winnipeg, one of my students ran into the dean's office and said, "How could you let that woman do those things? Get her out of here." So you need context. And I'm also a psychoanalyst, so my work is not disembodied. It is always connected to people and their emotional lives. And I tried to think, what is the one way, without sounding like a soap opera, that I could demonstrate my relationship with Bernie, which lasted 45 years. He died, but I didn't kill him. Here's an example of how we interacted. Telephone call. "Bernie, we have to meet at the gallery. So why don't we meet at a coffee shop? I'll pick a coffee shop and we'll have a cup of coffee and talk over our next move." Bernie says, "Oh, well, okay, what coffee shops are in the area? Where are we which one shall we decide to go to?" And here's what we always did. I said, "Bernie, you fucking Canadians. Yeah, you can't make a decision, you have to convene a fucking panel discussion just to decide when to go to a coffee shop." Bernie's retort was always, "You fucking Americans, you're always saying, follow, lead, or get out of the way." How many times we had that conversation in 40 years, you don't want to know. Okay, now, what I need to know is what you are curious about when someone has the technical creativity that Bernie had as a sculptor, and what it took to manifest the many works that he made. Like all Canadian artists, you start out hoping to have your work shown in gallery exhibitions. And Bernie Miller had his share of those. I think maybe I could show you the evolution. So he started out, come on baby, he was referred to by his friends as Bernie the Mechanical Boy. I don't know if you or any of you know about Bruno Bettelheim back in the day, but one of his major psychoanalytic accomplishments was to transform a kid who could only do things like this in his bedroom and transformed him into someone who had a social life and a creative life beyond the mechanisms that were his first love. So that calling Bernie the Mechanical Boy refers back to that article in the Scientific American back in the 50s about the transformation of a person from someone who is in love with objects to someone who could have a social life.
Typical makers, engineers with no social life.
I'll tell you, I'm not so sure whether that transformation wasn't a tragical mistake. But given on with the dialogue here, which I want it to be a dialogue because I don't know how much you all know about what it is to have an artist practice for decades and decades and decades. And don't ask me a question about Canadian art in terms of what it's like to be an artist in Canada, because you will set me on fire. So I'm just warning. Okay, Bernie's work always had this this narrative of how objects are in some form of social connection with each other and create movement, and of course set up an ambiguous predicament for the audience to project their thoughts and emotions, memories and knowledge into. So if there's one thing that I will tell artists, you don't have to worry about it unless you're going to be an artist as well, Sky. If your work doesn't have ambiguity, you may as well put it on the counter of a McDonald's fast food restaurant. Ambiguity is where meaning is created. And if this were a psychoanalytic audience, I could go on for hours about the theory behind that. But I want you to stay awake, so we'll move on. This is iconic for how Bernie worked, how he saw that you could create predicaments with objects. This object, when activated, the suspense was, it took forever for the top cone to come down to the bottom cone. And the question was, is this baby engineered enough that they're going to meet tip to tip? Now, I never told him this. Honey, I think this is about our relationship. Okay, so there you go. You see a narrative. Now, before I do another thing, does anybody want to say something or think something out loud? Because I don't want to pontificate. I want to pontificate. I love to. But actually, this has got to have some relevance to how you all work and think. At least how you think and imagine. So anybody want to make a comment or ask a question?
Yeah, anybody have questions? We're here in a makerspace, and Bernie.
Oh, I see a hand moving.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the philosophy on ambiguity. My question on Bernie's artistic process, I guess. So this is like, when we look at a mechanism like this as engineers, we're sort of inclined to think about, what are the numbers here? How do we simulate that sort of thing? Did Bernie ever end up doing calculations to see if the cones would actually end up touching? Or is this more of a, feel it out sort of way, and then the ambiguity is also part of the creative process for him?
Yeah, he had to do the calculations on everything he did. What he was excited about was where calculations fail. And that, of course, is a story of my life, really. We won't get into that. Yes, he loved to calculate. Let's go to, that's a good lead into another piece. So we want the pieces at City Hall, or whatever, it wasn't City Hall, across from Roy Thompson Hall. What is that?
Oh yeah,
Where?
the Roy Thompson Hall piece.
The Roy Thompson Hall piece.
And I've got some photos of that as well
Oh,
too.
okay, this baby.
Yeah, no, down that.
There,
That
there
one
you
right
go.
there. Yeah. This is the one from Roy Thompson Hall.
Yeah. Okay, so, yes, Bernie was, loved to calculate. He loved to see the quantifiable relationships between objects. And as an illustration of that, I forgot what year that piece was, but he was getting ready to design it, and we were going to a residency at the dance center, and he said, oh my gosh, I want this element to actually say something in digital form. And I just don't know, I don't know whether there's anybody at the dance center that's going to transform what I wanted to say into digital language. And I said, honey, why don't you just learn digital language? Why don't you just figure it out yourself? And he said, oh yeah, okay. He always was very good with my advice. So apparently there is, the perforations are digitally organized to say something. He never told me what it said. I think maybe now at this point I don't even want to know. But this is to say that as much as he loved, okay, the phrases, I'll come back to it. As much as he loved the history of mechanics and technology, his imagination did not, and his curiosity did not end in any particular era.
Yeah, if you guys go down to Roy Thompson Hall, you can do some imaging of that and do some image capture and then try and decode the secret message.
It actually says something. He
Yeah.
claimed it did. He claimed it did. And he was very articulate. So in answer to your question, yes. Now I don't want to go too far from the ethos that he and I lived by. And frankly, it was, property is theft.
Which is really the Linux. You know, if you look at the GNU Linux framework as well, is that this whole idea of copyright is you know, all of these proprietarian, I guess, or what some people call proprietarism, which is the weaponization of
Proprietarism, absolutely. Yeah. So, in that vein, I want to say, absolutely, he would get, first of all, an artistic profession like architecture and like serious engineering is a lifetime before you actually come into your own, because you're dealing with something that is complex. I'm just going to stop here for a moment. I see a crossroads, just like the one where that blues singer was out in Missouri. Who was that? He was out in Missouri. There was a crossroads. He had three different choices. This is no Robert Frost poem, you know, the one, two paths diverged in a wood. He decided which one to take. Okay, I'm at a crossroads right now. I need some direction. I need to know what you're curious about before I go on and on about the philosophy of being public with materials in the real world.
One thing that a lot of people here care about also is sort of the technology and the sort of freedom of technology, like the open source imaging, image processing, AI, intelligent imaging. Like, is AI enslaving us, or can AI empower us through computer vision and
I bet
sensing?
you know the answer to that. Okay, I'll tell you about technology. Technology is a medium for a person like Bernie. So if he had to learn a particular aspect of a trade, he would learn it. But you know, I don't understand what you need to know about the relationship between technology and his work. I mean, I wrote an article called Art and the Technological Ethos. And one of Bernie's sculptures was in the exhibition that this was the catalog essay for. And I'm going to get philosophical on you. You can't stop me. And I promise not to quote Heidegger. Basically, the problem being there is more, even to technological construction, than how to. And the question is also why and what for, and what are the consequences socially if you can pull it off. And I think that Bernie's work used technology. Here's the method. It used technological prowess in a playful way, and that throws off the narrative of do the job. That your work is a job to be done, and it can be done. The narrative that he worked with playfully and mystically was use technology so that the job asks the question, what else is there to think? What else is there to experience? What am I bringing to this technological marvel? I wonder, what do you think? Is there another piece that...
Yeah, as Baldwin once said, the purpose of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers. There's this whole idea. Radio theory might be good too, because that was a really good piece that sort of touched on this nexus of.
Do we have a view of it?
I've had trouble finding a lot of information on radio theory. I really love the piece, but there's not very much.
There's not a. There's not even. Oh, there it is. Okay, I got to tell you about context. And you would know this because an engineer never works alone.
Yeah, engineering is a lot of engineering is about teamwork.
It's teamwork, yes. And Bertie and I were part of a scene on Queen Street West in the 70s, 80s, and almost into the 90s a bit, which was extremely social and political. And that group still meets every Wednesday at a tavern. And we don't talk about the old days, we talk about the new days to come. This work, Radio Theory, was part of a city-wide effort by all the artists in that milieu to have an exhibition that dealt with the future. And at that point, whatever year that was, I know what year it was. I got to tell you, this is typical Bernie. He didn't have a florid emergence of his subconscious. I don't know what y'all think about having your subconscious emerge unexpectedly. This piece is 1984. This is the only piece in Bernie's entire 45 years of art that has a human figure in it. I'm not telling you any diagnoses, but that's the year I was pregnant. And that was the year of New City of Sculpture, and this is the piece. And the New City of Sculpture exhibition, the point of it was Toronto can be a new city for the way art relates to public life. And again, it's called Radio Theory, and it is a contemplation of a contemplation of how we are held in technology, how we are held in media. Okay,
You could say even how we sometimes are imprisoned in media.
Well, yeah, oh, I'm glad you have a dark side, baby. I'm glad you do. I'm so paranoid, I try to hide it. But, yes, how we are held, how we are in the crucible of technological forces that are not necessarily in the arms of people for the good of humanity.
Well, one thing that Bernie maybe never had a chance to foresee is the way in which technology would imprison us. Like, if somebody calls you on Zoom, you have to use Zoom. Imagine like a piece of paper that you could only write on with a certain specific brand of pen, like, or a canvas that you could only paint on with a Fuller paintbrush and no other brand of paintbrush.
This is where we are, yes, yeah. Now, Bernie was so innocent that every time I stated things paranoid like that, he would break out into a cold sweat and have nothing to say. His innocence was to the marrow. But my essay, Art and the Technological Ethos, was an example of my ability to be paranoid about the dangers of a technological society. Oh, the technological society, Jacques Ellul, 1953, written in French. Société technologique, in which basically he said exactly what you just said.
Yeah. And it's really amazing to look at some of this historical work as it leads up to today, to the era in which we live now. How you can trace that back to a lot of these early foundations of now. Instead of paranoia, we should call it a healthy skepticism. In science,
Oh, that's very kind of you, yes.
in science, we often talk about skepticism. Like whenever somebody says trust the science, in some sense they're not a scientist, because a scientist is skeptical. A scientist wants to verify stuff for themselves. So you assume an inherent conflict of interest in the purveyors of the technology, and you look for evidence in support of the good for humanity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the reason I embrace being describe myself as paranoid, I will also describe myself as a hysteric, is because those are such strong words. They lend themselves to poetry, and poetry is supposed to electrify your heart and your consciousness. Okay, somebody here's got an electrified consciousness right now. Do you have a question? Do you have a thought? Am I making enough sense that you want to? Yeah.
I was just wondering, it's kind of a philosophical question, but does like poetry and art, visual art, whatever it is, does it only have value if it is a product of the human mind? Or like the more technology is used to produce it, the less value it has? Just wondering what you think.
Well, that's a really important question. Can you overly technologize a work of art to the point where people can't find the ambiguity or the poetry? And that is absolutely central to how Bernie worked so carefully, that the mechanism of his work did not overpower the loose ends, the gaps in thinking that were represented, the ambiguity, and going back to that first piece I showed you, the potential for failure is essential to as a dimension of a technological device. I'm reminded of an artwork. It was a performance by Norman White. Did you ever meet Norman White?
Oh yes, there's a beautiful history of artists here in Toronto who've really sort of pushed the technological limits. Like there's
Doug Back, Norman White.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the performances that Norman did back in the 90s was we all gathered for his exhibition, and he spent the entire evening, and it was 4 hours long, saying, just a minute now, there seems to be a little glitch here. Give me a moment, I'm going to see if I can troubleshoot and get this going. And we were there for 4 hours, and that was the performance. The technology is failing, but we care and we want to know where it's going, and we know Norman's going to follow it till midnight. And that said more to what the question you're asking than the incredible razzle-dazzle that some artists who use technology employ. So I appreciate that. Moving forward, this has to do with technology as well, in its way. Come on, oh, there you go. Oh, I think it should. It's gonna get big? Is it gonna swell up?
Gotta love all this.
There it goes. Okay, this piece, we went to Rome for an exhibition, a 3-artist exhibition at a spot in Rome. And as usual, Bernie carried all the equipment to build the piece in a suitcase and a list of the stores in Rome that would sell the parts that didn't fit in the suitcase. This piece is called Presto Eternal City, and this relates to the predicament we are in our highly technically empowered society at the moment. Because he built a styrofoam version of one of the elements in the Vatican, this cornice, and it's the relationship between the base and the wall. But the irony, of course, was that the more recent technology, which is a shadow cast on this ancient cathedral-like architectural wonder, and the irony, the joke, is that supposedly we can do things. Now that we have the technology, electricity, the digital world, we can do things fast. And if we can do them fast, they're worth more than if it takes you 1,000 laborers 100 years to build something. And so Presto Eternal City was his way of raising that issue of what happens to labor when you have the fantasy that you can build a new Rome, a new city of sculpture, a new Peter Street basin faster than it took those the slave labor to build it originally. So this piece was a poem to the delusion of speed.
Not just the illusion of speed, but the delusion of
The
speed.
delusion of speed, not just the delusion, but the illusion, but the delusion. I'm not going to talk about another piece until somebody asks me a question. Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much. I've been really enjoying this talk. You mentioned about the subconscious a few minutes ago. Yes, sir. Yeah, you mentioned about the subconscious a few minutes ago. Now, about like a century ago or something, Rene Descartes mentioned that I think, therefore I am.
Yes, yes, the cogito.
Right, and so he focused on the cognitive substrate. But the thing is, there's a whole wealth and sort of like database of Eastern philosophy that focuses beyond cognition and just sees cognition as one dimension of the human being. And then there's the whole subconscious substrate. Now, what's your view and what was Bernie's view on technology that can make you see inwards as opposed to outwards and just constantly getting stimulated, be it as our Gen Z says, like reels, Instagram reels and stuff. So that's all external stimulation and keeps the cognitive substrate always at a state of chaos. But what about technology or art that can make you see the subconscious substrate or see inwards? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, to me, and I'm a fanatic, if art doesn't cause you to become startlingly aware of your subconscious river of thought, emotion, and memory, if art doesn't precipitate or provoke that realm of your being, it's boring. It's not going to last. It's a doodad. And of course, the interesting thing about Bernie, he didn't know he had a subconscious. That's why I could just control him completely, because I worked with his subconscious and he didn't know it was there. But in his own way, that's what his modus operandi was for an artwork. It had to motivate those things which cannot be rationally explained by cognition. And what are the formulas for that? A glitch, a disconnect between two elements, the possibility of failure, a factor which idiosyncratically somehow just triggers a memory you don't expect, a use of materials that they're not intended for. And this is just a short list of the types of gaps between reason and the unconscious or the spiritual, which you will have access to. So you're right. There is an issue here with technology's focus on the power to complete a task. And the ethical issue is, what task are you going to complete? I believe we still remember Auschwitz. That was a technological task that was completed. So Bernie was extremely interested in how the task completion is not the issue. And even though he didn't want to talk about his subconscious, he knew from his vast reading and me preaching at it all the time, that access, if the audience has access to some of the glitches in the so-called product, it'll activate their anxiety, and their anxiety will go right down to the substrate of your being, which is not mechanical. Well, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, even my co-founder, Chris Amony, my co-founder of Interaxon, we made the Muse brain sensing headband. He often said, I care more about the journey getting there. I don't care as much about what we accomplish as whether we stay to our ethical principles and have fun doing it to get there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw a hand behind you.
I just had a question about like the difference between like a simulation of something, for example, like an image of a sculpture. Oh, thanks. and like the act and seeing the actual sculpture. And I was wondering if Bernie had any considerations of like how like an image, like a sculpture would be turned into an image that people could learn from while the person's not there like in person, right?
I would say fundamentally, and realistically, we live in an image-based society at this point, and we did even back in the 80s. So, for an artist to demand that the image not be the version of their work, but that you had to walk to it, would be career suicide. So we have to accept some limitations of that question. But I would say that you have no idea what it's like to be in Vancouver and stand at the foot of that fucking thing. If we got a big picture of that, oh, I can make it big, can I?
Yeah, can we click on that?
Yeah, make it big.
Let me.
That baby is 120 feet high, I think. I don't know what meters are. I'm still back in Texas. That thing is humongous. But it's not intimidating. And that's because each one of these squares, rectangles, Bernie, having mastered digital technology, turned black and white photographs into dot matrix images and had them punched in steel. So, do we have we got something that shows?
I guess I don't see a view there that shows
Yeah.
the front of it, but the idea of halftone images
It's
with
half-tone images punched into Corten steel, meant to last 400 years. And what is the image? Now, this is the question. Because the image is what advertising agency, falls all over themselves to make a powerful image. The images that he used were not powerful. The images were from the archives of the history of Vancouver, of workers or citizens at particular moments. So that when you looked at it, you weren't seeing some grand event. You were seeing something where this is so casual. What the hell is going on here? Here's a monument on False Creek. It's the year of the Olympics, and those images are, that looks like a guy in an ice cream truck selling ice cream cones. But that was the political point he was making. That the image is meant to open up the citizen to where they live and the history where they live, and that could be them in the image because it's life. The image is not something to seduce you, to seduce your desire and for you to reach into your they're digital wallets now, aren't there, or some kind of thing where you could pay by just tapping your phone on something? I don't know. Okay, but I don't have to belabor the point. You're getting it.
Yeah,
We're
that's great.
talking real life. And this piece is humongous, but it was about history, and it was about the workers of history. And not workers like marching in uniforms on a subway strike, but the workers of everyday life. Okay. Um,
All right, yeah, that was,
oh, hello again.
Hello. I had a question, I think, which is relevant. Check. Okay. I had a question that I think is relevant to us as young engineers and artists, speaking to someone from a few generations ago. In particular, I wanted to ask, as you and Bernie grew older and experienced more of life, as potentially you changed your opinions or saw more of the world change around you, how did you see your art and craft evolve, and how do you think that might map into the modern era, where it seems like simultaneously nothing is ever changing while things are changing all the time, every day?
Yes, that is such an important question, because we are sold the delusion that the change is new, and yet we live where the ideology has stagnated. Absolutely. I would say, as an artist, Bernie trusted that his techniques of conveying the relationship between imagination, ethics, and technology, that somehow he could keep that question alive as he studied and contemplated those issues. And so he stuck to the core constellation: imagination, ethics, and materials. And he wasn't fooled by ideology in any way. Me, I got more paranoid and more hysterical the longer I've lived. And so I have become less demure in my writing and my art to squeak about the things I fear are happening. So I've evolved that way by becoming more dramatic. Whereas in my younger days, I think I may have seemed odd and unintimidated, but at this point, I am less demure. So I have evolved to take into account what you say. There's the flux of material change as a delusion, but underneath, the forces of tyranny are exactly the same as they were when Mithridates was running Persia in 500 BC. The lust for power will never go away.
excellent.
Yes, there's a person.
Yeah. So you talked about the importance of ambiguity in art pieces. So I was just wondering what you thought was a good ratio between abstraction and objectivism. That it's good enough to convey the message, but at the same time engage the audience as much as you want.
That is such an important art historical question, because we've all been through the era when New York stole the idea of modern art, the book written by Serge Guilbeault, and the question of how much ambiguity will have the effect of creating a state bewilderment in an audience, and how much ambiguity is too much. And what is interesting, I think, is that's a wonderful question that has no answer, because we're dealing with where's the work and who is the audience that's going to be looking. And I can guarantee you, if it's in a commercial art gallery, now, okay, here I'm getting paranoid on you. If it's in a commercial art gallery, you're not going to see much ambiguity. You're going to see something that's glossy, gorgeous, seductive, clear as a bell. So that audience you know, if that's your audience, you're going to stay away from ambiguity. You're okay with surrealism. Everybody gets surrealism because that's a package. But ambiguity, you're going to have to look in the artist-run centers or an artwork that's slammed onto a street corner or in a friend's basement because he's part of a cadre of, he or she's part of a cadre that is questioning what art can and cannot do. The era of abstraction, modernism, that hit like a whirlwind in New York City and Los Angeles, they managed to stay away from it pretty good. People like Rauschenberg brought the collage forward to try to mix up. But the era of modernism degenerated into the kind of design you could put on your bathroom tiles.
Yeah.
It's very hard to connect to the spiritual that in Houston, the Menil Foundation, the abstract artist, I think he even killed himself. It's very hard to connect to what they thought was the spiritual dimension that art, that modernism and its design could evoke. That was a beautiful adolescent folly that you could induce a sense of spiritual, cosmic awareness of your own self with an abstract design.
Yeah, there's a kind of modernism, and then postmodernism, and then post-postmodernism.
Yeah, and you know, really, postmodernism didn't last very long.
No.
Because the point of it was, fuck the idea of plagiarism. Plagiarism is a way of life to artists. If you can't plagiarize, you're not going to be able to make a single thing.
Well, this whole comes down to the copyright versus copyleft.
Yeah.
Copyleft versus copyright and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and postmodernism is really the death of postmodernism.
Yes, really.
And that's kind of an interesting, the world we're in now is kind of coming back to this idea of where does copyright stand? Where does intellectual property stand, in the world of art, science, and technology?
Yes, this is a very good issue, and I'm just going to brag to you what I did about plagiarism. It was so much fun. I was told, Jean, we want you to write one of your psychoanalytic articles about Barbie dolls. And so what I did was I had so much fun. I went to a trading card store, and they have boxes of Barbie trading cards. And on the back of every trading card was a question, who was this famous woman? Now, let me tell you, I realized that every woman that on the back of that trading card had been deserted by her husband, thrown in prison, beheaded, killed in an accident, executed, or died in poverty of tuberculosis. So I wrote my article about Barbie and sadism. Well, the publisher of the book that there was going to be a chapter in said, Jean, I think you better write to Mattel, and you want to use this image of Barbie killing a fish. I think it was out of a coloring book. I think you better, for copyright reasons, you better ask Mattel Corporation if you can use their image of Barbie killing a fish.
Fair use.
Fair use.
Or fair dealing, I guess.
So I wrote to them, and I got a wonderful letter from their lawyers saying, we urge you to desist and cease to use this image in a paper about our valuable product, which we do not permit any negative remarks. So I said to the editor, I guess we're going to have to include this lawyer letter as a footnote in the image. Problem solved.
That's great. And get the Streisand effect happening there a little bit too, you know, where now more people are going to be looking at that Barbie because the intended effect was to suppress it, but by trying to suppress it, they're going to make it more visible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes?
You mentioned your is from Texas, right? Yes. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation thus far. I was curious because you mentioned you're from Texas, right?
Yes.
I was curious what the differences are, I guess, in the art world, compared to Texas and Ontario. Like, how do they differ, and what are the similarities?
Oh, okay. Well, okay, there are many Texases. And if you're talking about Austin, it's hot there. Or, although I hear the corporations have finally moved in and it's draining its blood. All I can say is, from the day I was born, I had one purpose in mind. 2, 1, to be a writer and an artist. 2, to get the fuck out of Texas. So, I know nothing about the life and the work of the artists on the ground in Texas. I skedaddled to the University of Chicago as soon as I was old enough to buy my own train ticket. So I have nothing to say, except the artists from Texas. I do admire all of the country and western singers, George Jones. Of course, we all admire that Port Arthur gal, Janis Joplin, Johnny Winter, and of course the great artist and singer Terry Allen. Now, do y'all know the work of Terry Allen? You gotta dig this guy up. One of his best songs is "There's a Truckload of Art," and it crashed on the highway, and you can see the flames for miles around, but nobody knew because it's out on the prairie blowing up. Anyway, Terry Allen, look up his songs, his early work. He was also a visual artist. I don't know anything about that, but he's a pure Texan. Tragic, paranoid, and ironic as hell. That's all I know about art in Texas.
Right. Okay, so
Okay.
yeah.
The only other thing, I don't want to put you to sleep, because if you're hypnotized, what I'm going to get the power over you when you're hypnotized. You'll be doing things you didn't know that you're capable of doing if you're hypnotized. But I wanted to give gifts, but there has to be a raffle or something because there's more people than there are little gifts to give.
Yeah, you could give them one per table because we're divided up into table groups.
Okay, so yeah, all right.
And then it
that's
could be a
good.
group,
Okay, I will do that. This is. I think this is an important point that I'm illustrating here. The difference between commercial art and committed art is that the issue of recognizable style is a commercial pressure. And so many famous artists, they don't have to sign their canvases. They all did. Because they found a style that was recognizable. And although I think people can tell when a piece is by Bernie Miller, or we were discussing down at Peter Street Slip the other day, a piece people thought was by Bernie Miller, but was like a kind of a homage knockoff,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is beautiful, a beautiful effect. But this piece that I've given to each table is just one of the myriad of ways I work. I do not have a style. You will, if somebody hands you something that's got my name on it, when you read it, you're not going to know whether I did it or not, because I do not have a style. And this is just one version of an idea that I worked with an artist to produce based on how she thought and how she lived and how she practiced her craft. And I could go, I could go on just for a few more minutes about that. I invented fictocriticism back in 1983. And the point of it is, you don't need to talk logically about the work of art that's in a gallery. You do not need to talk art historically about how a work in a gallery is valuable. My idea was you need to meet at a bar with the artist, become their friend for a decade or so, spend a lot of time talking with them and going to galleries, look at the slides and look at their work, and when they have an exhibition, I made up a story that was not about the work, but parallel to the work. Not about the work, but work adjacent, in which the issues and the values and the methods of that artist, which I had known for so many years, were embodied in a narrative. Now, I gave that formula to a group of art students out in Saskatchewan, and one of them raised her hand and she said, that sounds like career suicide. I said, I hope so, because that's exciting. Anyway, that's what fictocriticism is. It's not about the art, it's to the art, with the art, and you can't write it unless you know unless you understand the way an artist, the artist friend, thinks, works, cares, and moves in the world. So that's why that thing looks that way. Lisa, who did those drawings, said, okay, do a fictocriticism piece. And so
It's beautiful.
about that way.
All right, well,
All right.
yeah, so that's been a really good sort of introduction to a lot of this really important artwork, and this gives you some context for kind of how we should think about society and think about the world, think about AI, computer vision, machine learning. Are they really helping us? Is it really making the world a better place? Or are there some important questions we should be asking about it? And we're going to stay in touch with Jeanne here as we continue with the Peter Street Basin project, the Peter Street Basin cleanup, the imaging, the sensing in Peter Street Basin, and the tracking of the garbage, and using technology and computer vision and robots and submarines and everything to clean up the basin. It's really important to understand the depth and gravitas of the artwork there, and sort of the context for all of this in terms of, and the broader intellectual landscape we like to think about. So it's you can think really about engineers and designers work for clients usually, whereas artists and scientists work for their own heart. So art and science are about finding the inner truth and beauty of the universe, whereas engineering and design are usually about satisfying client needs. And so what we look at here, I like, people would think of me maybe as more the artist and scientist, although I'm an engineer professionally, but many of us who are engineers struggle with this issue. Are we serving clients, or are we interested in inner truth? I mean, the Professional Engineers Ontario says that engineers should serve the public first and foremost before their client. So when you got these engineers chopping off the sewer pipes and endangering the public to build a spa at lightning speed and rush projects ahead, they're putting the public in danger. This is it's almost like the Hippocratic Oath, that doctors swear to. Engineers also should uphold the society. So it creates this tension or ambiguity, exactly what you're talking about. Our profession is laced with the same kind of ambiguity that your work deals with. So we definitely want to stay in touch as we evolve this project forward, and we build a group of people, a community locally, who really wants to create and shape and structure this world. So let's have a big round of applause for our guest speaker.
I'm grateful that you invited me. I'm grateful. Thank you.
And if there's any more questions that any of you have as the year progresses, what we will do is I can forward, I can take questions and forward to her. We'll stay in touch. And then we're going to have our symposium on March 30th, probably. That's a planned date anyway. And maybe you'll want to come back and give a keynote or presentation during our symposium. We're going to bring all the world's thought leaders from MIT, Stanford, University of Toronto, NASA, IEEE, world's largest technical society, and bring everybody together and talk about this idea of Peter Street Basin as a university. Peter Street Basin University using Lake Ontario as an outdoor teaching research lab on computer vision, AI, robotics, machine learning, with a purpose for humanity, advancing technology for humanity and Earth, not advancing technology for profit.
I'm so there, and if you don't invite me, I'll be there anyway. I have to chain myself to the podium.
All right. Okay, well, thank you.